Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to join the RSM and Dragos webinar, Defending Asia Pacific's Critical Infrastructure. During this webinar, your lines have been muted for the duration, but we do want to interact with you throughout the webinar. So please raise any questions utilising the Q&A function. If you do have any issues with the volume or anything like that, please also just raise a question in the Q&A and somebody will be able to help you. I've now got great pleasure to hand you over to our two speakers for today, and hopefully that you'll find the webinar really useful and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Avril. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kaustubh Vazalwar. I'm a director here with RSM Australia, and we're glad that you could all join us for today's conference. Move to the next page. Before we get started on the main content, I do want to start with the acknowledgement of the country. We do acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and waterways on which we gather today and pay our respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. Now, we're here to discuss a very critical topic today, defending Asia Pacific's critical infrastructure with a specific focus on operational technology, cyber resilience, and what RSM Australia and Dragos bring together as a powerful capability together with all of you. A quick introduction. My name is Kaustubh Vazalwar. As a director with RSM Australia Cybersecurity Services, I've been working in this industry for close to about 23 years now, working in various capacities, right from the industry to advisory and assurance roles across various different organizations across the globe, and work very closely with clients in this particular space to manage cyber resilience, data privacy, as well as information security requirements. I also work as an additional role of a cybersecurity technical committee member with the Australian Computer Society, helping progress cybersecurity in the country. Joining with me today is my esteemed colleague, Ben Sullivan, who is again a director with Dragos. Ben, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Kaustubh. I feel like I should have gone before you. You've got such an incredible introduction. But for those I haven't met, Ben Sullivan, I look after channel and alliances for Dragos across Asia Pacific and Japan. Had the pleasure of working for Dragos for the last 3 years, and am proud to be able to represent Dragos with our partnership through RSM Australia. My history is I've been in different organizations across the cyber community over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and prior to military experience, honing my skills in cybersecurity after some time supporting as a combat radio operator.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. With that, let's get started with the main content. And the agenda for today's discussion over the next 45 to 50 minutes is essentially spread across 5 different areas. We will evaluate and essentially go through details of why a partnership between RSM and Dragos brings unique capabilities to all of you and the wider market. We will spend some time understanding essentially the threat landscape, especially as it applies to operational technology and critical infrastructure within the country and to the region overall. We'll also spend some time essentially talking about operational resilience frameworks as well as some of the key challenges that we see organizations in this sector facing today and how we can potentially manage them. And also, most importantly, spend enough time understanding what are some of the best practices when it comes down to incident response, threat hunting, as it applies to operational technology. Last but not the least, we do want to spend some time looking at some of the relevant case studies so that we can understand and learn from them so as to manage these kind of threats proactively going forward. Whenever I start the topic around resilience, I love to talk about and start with this wonderful quotation by one of the leading management thinkers of our time, Peter Drucker. What it focuses on is the importance of forward thinking. All of us in our capabilities and our roles face unique challenges when it comes down to managing obviously the roles, managing the infrastructure capabilities, teams, diverse third parties from time to time. Each one of us obviously comes across unique risks when it applies to the role as well as obviously to the infrastructure that we intend to protect. Making sure that we are adaptable, making sure we're able to understand the risks as well as the critical assets that we protect, making sure we apply new age capabilities to manage the new age threats is going to be extremely important as we continue to manage business and critical processes and operations going forward. Now, the biggest question from our perspective is to make sure that we are clear in terms of why did RSM Australia and Dragos decide to partner together? One of the key focus areas is essentially helping organizations in this space really manage cybersecurity threats. In any part of the world today, when it comes down to critical infrastructure elements which can have potential health and safety and widespread humanitarian impact, it's important to be able to manage risks which can take down critical operations. We are looking at a situation whereby attacks are happening practically every 39 seconds, where a majority of businesses are being impacted, and where incident response readiness for capabilities like this has a huge amount of dependency on the right subject matter expertise, as well as critical third-party capabilities as well. At the same time, across the region and in ANZ as well, we are seeing increasing regulatory pressure, as well as reliance on technology, as well as obviously advancement of the attacks that we see, not only because of being supplemented by AI, but also because of the increasing amount of dependence on external supply chains and third-party providers. We are all in a situation whereby disruption is no longer just a possibility, and we do need to proactively work towards designing resilience as part of our processes. And we see this, especially when we start talking to organizations in terms of the challenges that they're looking today. They're looking at essentially capabilities which are increasingly dependent upon staff, which is not only internal, but also third parties, increasing dependence upon subject matter experts. They're worried about, obviously, the complexity of their infrastructure as it stands today, but also when we start bringing in external hybrid environments and third-party platforms. And most importantly, a landscape which is being increasingly supplemented by things such as AI-enabled attacks. That really helps set the context and one of the key decision makers for these two leading partners to actually come together as to provide a joint capability. RSM and Dragos together bring a unified portfolio of capabilities with deep local content, deep local expertise, but along with that, global operational technology expertise. RSM Australia has been working together with organizations in the public-private sector, especially within this particular space, for more than 100 years now. Align that with Dragos's capabilities, especially in operational technology and threat intelligence. It brings a powerful proposition to manage proactively cyber risks, especially as it applies to operational technology space. What we're looking to provide to all of you is essentially an integrated incident response capability, a way to manage cyber risks through OT environments proactively, and most importantly, help you build scalable and repeatable uplift programs for OT cyber resilience. Within RSM Australia, to kind of just do a quick deep dive, we obviously have been working from a cyber resilience and security and privacy perspective for a number of years now, working not only from defining and implementing strategies to plans to critical incident response readiness, but also deep dive technical security assessments, vulnerability assessments, penetration tests as it applies to IT and OT environments. But at the same time, assessing the configurations and security controls, especially as it applies to the wider environments. Again, our focus has always been ensuring working towards the right customer deliverables and ensuring we're able to work towards agreed sort of deliverables. And that has helped us be part of this prestigious award 7 years in a row now. Resilience has been one of the key focus areas for RSM. And that is where the added capability and along obviously partnership with Dragos makes a big difference. Helping organizations prepare for incident response readiness, whether it's from a process perspective or technology perspective, makes a big difference. And it's one of the key areas as we have been focusing on for a number of years now. I also want to kind of call out Dragos's leading OT cybersecurity platform. Ben, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanking you. Yeah, so Dragos is an operational technology cybersecurity firm. We were built in operational technology and focused solely on operational technology and industry control systems. We have 3 key elements that make up our technology stack. You're seeing there the security platform, which is intended to provide that visibility, detection, and response capabilities to operational networks. Focused on the OT network monitoring through deep packet inspection. Left and right of that main capability is our threat intelligence service and our incident response or rapid response services that formulate the key experience and differentiators across the Dragos cybersecurity platform. We'll dive more into some of the threat intelligence capability and the incident response capability throughout the rest of this webinar. So back to you, Kay.
Thank you, man. So together, at the end of the day, RSM and Dragos are bringing in this joint capability to the market, which essentially brings in deep local regulatory experience, deep cybersecurity experience, together with a world-leading threat intelligence platform and industry protection platform to help all of you and the wider industry essentially confidently and proactively help manage cyber risk as it applies to operational technology environments. Now, let's look at the threat landscape. We've seen some of the reasons where we're looking at what some of the cybersecurity leaders are worried about, especially as it applies to operational technology. There are certain specific threat landscape points of view which are important for us to understand. Ben, over to you.
Thanking you again. If we just go next slide. So every year, Dragos releases a massive document, and it's our biggest document release of the year, titled Dragos Year in Review. Dragos Year in Review is comprised of the research and the intelligence that our teams across multiple teams within Dragos provide. It's a culmination of that work that they do of the year just gone. The latest version of this, or the latest iteration, is the 2024 Dragos Year in Review, and every year we analyze the threat groups that Dragos tracks within our threat intelligence program. You can see a number of the colorful dots represent individual threat groups, and over the years they have either continued to be active or become dormant in their assaults against operational technology networks. So every year we analyze that and we either retire or we introduce net new threat groups. And in the last 12 months, we have brought back bauxite and graphite. All of the threat groups that Dragos identify and release to the public are named after rare earth minerals. So bauxite and graphite were two that we found this year have an increased capacity against operational technology networks. Each of these threat groups are publicly available for your consumption to read up about. And the Dragos Year in Review has a lot more detail about some of these threat groups and the analysis done where we found some of these threat groups in the year just gone. So as you can see, each year represented here, we have had a number of years where multiple threat groups have been more active. And in the next slide, I'll take you through just a little dive on a threat group that was identified by Dragos in 2023, but it has become more relevant in the last 12 and certainly more relevant in the last 6 months of the calendar year 2025. Dragos founded group VaultSite is attributed alongside Vault Typhoon, which you all should have heard of, as a Microsoft founded group that have been targeting operational technology and industry control systems in North America and making their way down into the APAC region. Why this threat group is important to understand as it relates to the threat landscape is that Dragos doesn't attribute as to who did or who is carrying out these assaults. Dragos provides you the information about the groups in order to protect against them. But Vault Typhoon itself was attributed to the Chinese government, and they have been found in the energy sector and more frighteningly across the electric sector using living off the land techniques for a number of months, up to and over 12 months' time. The group VaultSite itself, you can see on the threat group card here, it is targeting some of the loss of confidentiality, theft of operational information, and espionage and persistent access. It's believed that this group is using that persistent access in order to steal data, but also pre-prepare themselves for potential incidents to follow. Some quotes there from the US FBI Director Christopher Wray at the time, just to showcase how important some of these threat groups are in the defense of the critical infrastructure, but more importantly, the third-party supply chain that has an impact in the event that critical infrastructure does fall to a malicious event in the operational networks themselves. Thanks, Kaustubh. So the last piece here I just wanted to touch on from a threat landscape perspective is ransomware. We hear about ransomware all too often, and the collective group we is that all of us on this call as a collective from a cybersecurity perspective. But why is that different in OT? We have seen a surge or an increase by 87% in the year 2024, which is quite an astonishing number. We've broken that down by sector, and all the numbers you see here represented are specific to operational industry control system networks. The groups increased by 60%. That stat just means that we have seen a lot more groups or ransomware groups or groups more broadly targeting infrastructure assets through the use of ransomware as a tactic. You can see manufacturing there has had the most number of incidents in the last 12 months. And we believe the reason why is due to their ability or their requirement to maintain the integrity of those networks for commercial. So if they were to go down or there was an incident in the manufacturing environment, there is a $1 per minute spend in the event that they were shut down. Total of almost 1,700 incidents. It's quite a large number and certainly a tactic being used more and more often. The key points there in the center of your screen is that 25% of those incidents involved a full shutdown, while 75% involved a disruption to operations to some degree. And Dragos uses the terminology of loss of view and loss of control as the two key metrics for an operational technology network. So the involved disruption at some point had a loss of view or loss of control factor to those ransomware incidents. So two key things to consider are who you are protecting yourselves from, being the threat groups and the information you can bring down from Dragos's intelligence services, and to help expedite that operationalization through RSM. And the second piece there is the ransomware is becoming more of a service in the operational technology space.
Thank you, Ben. And I think it's a very important trend to understand as well in terms of specifics that apply to OT and the differences that you see in the market. So thanks for sharing that. And one of the key shifting trend that we see increasingly, and this is across the board right now, is obviously attacks as well as cyber threats, which are increasingly moving not just from encryption and extortion, but increasingly causing large-scale disruption, large-scale reputational harm, causing broad attacks across the entire sector. At the same time, obviously, organizations and cybersecurity leaders, operational leaders are looking at a range of different challenges, whether it is limited resources and budget constraints as they stand today, especially with the kind of financials that we see across every different geography in the current times, to capabilities which are limited in terms of detection and monitoring, as well as actually preparing for an incident response, which have a requirement specifically from an operational technology perspective. Add to that the complexities with legacy capabilities, the supply chain risks, as well as third parties who work together, that further adds to the complexity that cybersecurity leaders are working with today. What this tells us, whether it's basically the fact that whether it's a manufacturing organization, whether it's an energy organization, whether it's a water utility organizations Today, in every geography and in ANZ and in APAC, the target is absolutely every organization, right? And essentially what it needs is focused investments, which can essentially help with proactive cybersecurity in this particular domain. Now, Ben covered quite well in terms of the threat landscape that we see today. At the same time, it's quite well known that obviously there are a range of different frameworks, range of different standards that exist today, especially as it applies to these capabilities to which organizations are trying to align to. Some of the top of these essentially being the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the requirements from IEC 62443, as well as obviously the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. Now, the good part from an IEC perspective, obviously, Australia has formally adopted that as its formal standard when it comes down to critical infrastructure just last week. Great positive to take away. Now, each of these requirements in each of these different frameworks have a variety of different expectations, whether it's governance, whether it's ongoing protection mechanisms, whether it's incident response, as well as reporting capabilities, or from the point of view of monitoring. At the same time, each of these have specific challenges when it comes down for operational leaders and cybersecurity leaders to start applying that and have a measure of proactive resilience to the OT environment. From an NIST CSF perspective, which is exactly not a fit for an OT service scenarios perspective, to, for example, the complexities and certification burden which can come with 62443, to obviously a prescriptive nature when it comes down to SOCI. Each of these has their own pros and cons, but at the same time, it's important to understand what are these requirements, whether it's their tiers or risk profiles, and what are some of those requirements that we go with. At the same time, there are certain specific challenges that we see when we talk to cybersecurity leaders in this space across this particular sector. First is monitoring challenges, right? We have a range of different tools, especially as it applies to the wider IT environment, which don't really understand or support the industrial protocols in OT. You're seeing obviously capabilities, especially from an endpoint protection perspective, which are not really ready or incompatible with obviously the equipment from an ICS perspective. At the same time, anomaly detection in this particular space can be difficult, right? We have to have the right sort of subject matter expertise as well as obviously the right sort of tools. And add to that the complexities around compliance. If we expand that to the wider region-specific challenges, we have a range of different points of view. Asset visibility. We can't protect what we don't know. How many times do we come across situations where we have a range of different OT assets or IoT assets spread across different regions, different locations, and we still have no visibility in terms of their current state, the vulnerabilities that exist, obviously their particular life cycle management as well, right? These are very common challenges across obviously monitoring these assets. At the same time, it's not a surprise that there is extremely heavy reliance when it comes down to external service providers across the region who obviously support these particular equipment and obviously have a big say when it comes down to managing them from a security perspective as well. At the same time, we've talked about the challenges when it comes down to shortage of skills and the right set of tools, but also when there is an awareness from the perspective of board level capabilities or strategic guidance for this equipment. There's plenty of guidance out there when it comes down to IT. How much of that is really focused on OT, which does require its own specific directions. Now, how do we go about it? At the end of the day, the biggest question in mind is fine, we have challenges, we get that. How do we typically recommend organizations manage these particular challenges? I typically like the crawl, walk, and run approach. It's important to discover, it's important to then monitor, and then important to continue working towards resilience. It's important to understand that we need to set a roadmap approach starting from top down, going with the strategic guidance, strategic support to ensure that we have a requirement to actually drive these particular capabilities forward. Starting with assets, trying to understand what do we need to protect? What are some of the critical risks? Where do we need to make the investments? Going on to the requirements around immediate protection, the right set of solutions, capabilities to ongoing long-term compliance management as well. A strategic roadmap approach always helps you in terms of driving those quick wins, driving those awareness requirements within the organization to ensure you continue driving towards your end uplift capabilities. Now, we have discussed quite a few things so far. We've discussed obviously the need for capabilities like this. We've discussed and understood the threat landscape as it applies to OT, as well as some of the key compliance framework challenges and approach methodologies. One of the key areas of focus and importance for almost everyone in this sector is what are some of the good practices that we see to manage incidents when it comes down to OT. Ben, I'll hand it over to you.
Many thanks. And just before this next slide pops up, just a quick reminder that you can submit questions to the Q&A. We have had a number drop in there, but if you do have questions as we go, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A function, and we will endeavor to get to them at the end of the session. So yeah, as Kaustubh has just been going through, I can't align to the crawl, walk, run analogy any harder. I think that's a really important takeaway there when it comes to operational technology or industry control systems. And one of the biggest things that that Dragos is aligned to is the SANS 5 critical controls and the statement at the top that defense is doable. Oftentimes people look at the operational technology network or industry control system functions of a network and it gets overwhelming with the amount of frameworks, with the amount of recommendations. The SANS 5 critical controls for effective ICS security was a document written by Robert Lee, CEO of Dragos and co-founder, and Tim Conway in both of their roles at SANS Institute. And they understood and did research on every known, publicly known incident in operational technology. And they distilled that down into what were the 5 key or critical controls that would have prevented or minimized the damage done to these operational technology incidents. And you're now seeing this, the top 5 critical controls there. There is a further document that you can read yourselves. It is a document written by SANS. If you would like to see further about this, please reach out to Kaustubh and we will endeavor to get that across to you on behalf. But these are mapped quite clearly, the key critical controls that organizations can embark on for their uplift or their journey of OT cybersecurity from a crawl, walk, run perspective. The key thing there is critical control number one is have an incident response plan. Now, when we recommend having an incident response plan, it is not about having your IT incident response plan and just whiting out the I and putting an O in front of it. There needs to be an upfront identification and an acknowledgement that IT and OT are different networks for a different outcome. And therefore have different priorities. So an OT incident response plan needs to be well thought through, including understanding who is responsible for the elements of that operational technology network in the event of something nefarious occurring or the intended event. What Dragos recommends, and this is something that we don't share often, but through our partnership with RSM Australia, we wanted to provide this for the creation of an OT incident response framework that you're able to go away and help look at and reach out to our friends at RSM Australia to help you conduct what is an important piece of your journey in the operational technology cybersecurity uplift. This is a well-known framework that was created again by SANS. It's the PIC-ERL or the PIC-ERL. It's a well-established framework that reflects proven and common emergency response protocols. What it does best is it allows for discussion across multiple phases, and it is essentially a sensible breakdown of tasks and appendices as you go through each of the different phases here. Phases can constitute chapters. So if you look at this as a broader piece of work, each phase can be considered a chapter in the overall incident itself and the response to that. For instance, site with different formal central procedures may substitute or extend different phases. Some phases to may be more detailed. They may have playbook level documentation. And some may reference existing documentation and procedures that you might be able to pull from some of your incident response in other elements of networks across the organization. The three key points across the top there to the right-hand side of this slide, I'll just take your eyes to the ownership of contain, eradicate, and recover. When it comes to OT, it's usually within the OT operators and the teams that look after some of these capabilities within. So it's important that contain, eradicate, and recover is part of this process, and you involve all of the different elements of the OT operators within the networks themselves. From here, it's important to have an incident command system or a structure well established pre-incident. Again, not something we share too often, so this is for the audience today, and feel free to take this back with your organizations and at least have a conversation about, do we have an incident command system or a structure set up now so that we are at least ready for something if it does happen. The structure you're seeing here is used by fire services, law enforcement, and military. Coming from the military myself, our co-founders, ex-military, we have a rich history of employees that have served and also come from public law enforcement, fire services, or first responders. So you can see that we align very closely to some of the procedures that have been put in place across a number of these types of organizations. If you haven't taken a screenshot of that already, I highly recommend. It's just about understanding who is responsible for each of these processes, from executive leadership all the way down to the operational section chiefs across the network itself. And one key point that I'll reiterate down the bottom there is the consideration for shift turnover and unavailable personnel. Oftentimes when we assess incident response plans for organizations, this hasn't been a consideration and needs to be one of the upfront considerations for shift turnover and unavailable personnel. Evidently, the attacks typically don't happen during business hours, and they typically last longer than one business day. So please consider that as you go through this process as well. Over to you, Kaustubh.
I think the next one was essentially around threat hunting.
It is.
Incident response was obviously one very important thing, but I think the other aspect is moving to proactive risk management. I think threat hunting brings that unique flavor, Ben, as I think that would be good for our audience to know as well.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. So with that flavor, it's important to understand upfront what is threat hunting. It's a term that is often talked about within the industry, but it has different meanings to different people. So what is threat hunting to Dragos is a proactive data-driven methodology that involves an iterative search for specific events within the environmental data itself, going beyond standard detection capabilities. Now, what we mean there is a threat hunt is only as good as the environmental data you have. And it's about going beyond the typical detection standards and capabilities and adding the context to the environment as it adds up there. So next, once we understand what is threat hunting, the next thing to understand is why threat hunt and why we are giving you the insights as to threat hunting as a capability to consider throughout your operational technology journey. There's 4 key components, and the first one is the early threat detection. It's a pivotal piece for being able to quickly uncover potential network intrusion activity and actively evading standard defenses, minimizing adversary dwell time, and mitigating the impact of an attack by getting in and adopting the early threat detection prior to an event. The next bubble it'll pick up, or the next box that'll turn up on screen, is reducing response time through rapid response. And what we like to address there is the potential threats to equip incident responders. It minimizes the risk of operational downtime or of safety incidents. The next piece there is misconfiguration identification. That's talking about how expert threat hunters can uncover vulnerabilities and misconfigurations that automated systems might miss, hoping to reduce the potential impact there. I'll just build out this last slide here. It's proactive defense or proactive risk mitigation. Proactive threat hunting on its own can find malicious behavior that can evade standard defenses, showcasing the need for human insights to identify the subtle signs of compromise that might be overlooked by autonomous systems or automated systems themselves. A significant barrier to executing these use cases here, these 4 use cases on the screen, effectively, is that organizations often possess insufficient expertise and data in-house. So back to my initial point on that last slide is the threat hunt is only as good as the environmental data that the organization possesses. So that is a really critical understanding of that. There is understanding what environmental data you have, and do you have enough to create a threat hunt that is effective for the hypothesis that you're formulating. So understanding the what is threat hunting, understanding the process of why and now how Dragos threat hunts. So we have a team internally known as OT Watch. I see a few of our customers on the call now who have an OT Watch service, and essentially this runs alongside our visibility detection and response platform, where our threat hunters or our OT Watch team proactively threat hunt as a service. We take 3 things into consideration: the inputs on the organization, the processes that we put around our threat hunting procedure, and then the outputs. So what is the output we're looking for? But I'll keep your eyes to the process side for now, because that is really the key piece there. And what our processes starts with is formulating a hunt hypothesis from strategic inputs. So based on the inputs to the left and based on the intended output, what is our hypothesis? And that might be something like as simple as, does Frosty Goop exist within our network? From there, we build queries within the Dragos platform itself. And then the final piece is execute the defined hunts across the OT Watch fleet. When you see the term fleet there, we use that as our entire customer base. So I'll give you an example of how this works across our fleet of customers with Frosty Goop itself. So the team used the threat intelligence from our intelligence team and the indicators of compromise that were then codified in the Dragos platform, plus some additional inputs and expertise through our OT Watch team to actively hunt for potential adversarial activity. The threat hunters formulated the hypotheses based on queries in the platform and executed the hunts daily across the fleet of customers. And they helped determine what was genuinely bad versus what might be a misconfiguration or an unintentional error. That allowed the OT Watch team to close out false positives and focus on real threats for organizations' environments that had Frosty Goop within them. What this means in terms of an output is that OT Watch was able to elevate critical findings, supporting the case, open an incident, and additionally, they deliver weekly hunt reporting and quarterly insights after the fact to help customers operationalize what was found in the initial threat hunt. The OT Watch threat hunts and threat hunting more broadly in OT environments gives peace of mind. It's hunting for bad, but it also identifies what is not bad. So consider it in those two buckets. Again, hunting for bad and identifying what is not bad to provide that peace of mind service. The underlying theme across everything that I've just talked about, from threat hunting all the way back to your threat landscape, is that everything is predicated by one thing, and that is visibility. And something that Kay talked about earlier is understanding your assets and your environments there. We've had a question which we'll answer live shortly from the audience about understanding asset visibility. I'll take you back to this slide, and the reason why is it's a critical control. It's critical control number 3, and it is ICS network monitoring visibility. You need to understand what you are protecting yourself around. And the underlying comment there is you can't protect what you can't see. So critical control number 3 is ICS network visibility and monitoring. And the stat that you're seeing there in 2022, yes, it's a little dated, is 80% of Dragos services customers, that's our incident response team, had limited to no visibility in their OT environments. That has reduced slightly in the last 2 or 3 years, but we still see a number of organizations that haven't got the asset visibility into their organizations to be able to set themselves up for a roadmap of maturity in the OT cybersecurity field. The reason we talk about network visibility, sorry, Kay, just the last one there is the key points you're seeing on the slide just gone. So maintaining an asset or inventory of assets, mapping the vulnerabilities against those assets once you have that, and then actively monitoring the traffic for potential threats across the visibility that you have. Lastly, there is validating the security controls implemented in the defensible architecture. So that all comes from the visibility piece. Again, everything's predicated by the visibility you have into your environment and the deep inspection of that visibility as well. Over to you, Kat.
Thanks, Ben. And I think it's good coverage across the capabilities that are important for organizations today to either manage the incident or, like we discussed, to stay a step ahead, understand what are the common pitfalls, right? Asset visibility is such a very common topic that we actually see across the board, where organizations can't really see what they have at the end of the day and don't have the end-to-end visibility and have issues later on. Speaking of have issues later on, I think it would be good to cover some of the critical case studies that we see for organizations in this sector who have been impacted. One of the largest impact that was seen in this sector is a couple of years ago in 2021 was the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. A massive attack across the pipeline, which practically halted operations for a number of days, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of impact across the board. Now, rather than focusing on the negatives, I want to focus on what did the industry take away from this? What do we as a group have to take away from this? I think there are a range of different lessons learned. The studies that were published post this particular incident in the last couple of years have been focused on how network segmentation between the IT and OT network environment, which allowed some of those particular crawls to happen, was important. There has been appropriate documentation which talk about how OT-specific incident response planning was important, wasn't really well planned enough, right? Ben talked about earlier about the differences and the critical differentiation between creating an OT-specific incident response plan, the needs, the specific focus areas from a perspective of availabilities, the third parties and the critical subject matter expertise involved. It's important to work on that. At the same time, proactiveness cannot just depend upon static plans. It's important for us to understand the importance of any of these particular capabilities is underlined by the fact that any of these plans, any of these procedures, any of these readiness elements for that matter, can only be useful enough if they're well tested. If the simulation exercise focused around that, whether it's from a specific part of the organization or to the end-to-end critical process as they stand, are well tested, and right from the executive team to the operations team to obviously the third-party teams who are involved in the incident response are actually working with us on that. The other one was the impact again in US in February 2021, which was a critical attack on the SCADA system at Oldsmar water treatment plant. This one could actually have ended up having a major health and safety impact to the thousands of residents of this particular town, where there was essentially exploitation via TeamViewer, some of the vulnerabilities with the TeamViewer, where someone internally tried to obviously increase the sodium hydroxide levels, which are the above normal levels in the water supply. Imagine the massive amount of health and safety and citizen impact it could have in this particular case. Obviously, as you can imagine, these kind of issues raise a number of different investigations when it comes down to issues like this, and they did, and obviously there were a range of different findings which have been published. Again, as earlier, we obviously will focus on what have we taken as learnings from this. A range of different points, including obviously utilization of shared outdated tools like of TeamViewers, utilization of multi-factor authentication, right? Utilization of capabilities which have not really been tested enough from a perspective of security. Lack of monitoring capabilities, which obviously did not happen in this particular case or were too late. Most importantly, access controls, right? Extremely important to make sure, obviously, whether it's internal members of the team or obviously external third-party members who are supporting critical operations have the access controls well reviewed and documented and managed on a regular basis. Finally, a particular case study very close to home here. DP World Australia, just a couple of years ago, a major impact when it came down to Lockbit ransomware. Again, major impact across critical operation, especially during peak movement times. And again, a major impact to the business and did cause quite a wave within obviously the region as well. Again, based upon the various investigations that have happened, there are quite a few learnings that have come out as well. The most important one is segmentation. Understanding obviously the assets as they exist, the IT and OT, obviously having the appropriate segmentation from a network zoning perspective, having the appropriate detection capabilities for especially which is critical to OT environments, extremely important. At the same time, when talked about threat hunting, especially for critical environments like this, intelligence-led threat hunting becomes an extremely time-sensitive information, which could have been very important here. At the same time, we talked about resilience. We talked about incident response playbooks. Very important again for critical operations, well documented, well planned, and well tested to make sure that these will work and support us when we actually need them. Each of these particular case studies essentially have a range of different learnings for us to take away, which tell us a range of different factors to focus on, which obviously we can work on. We focused on understanding the threat landscape. We talked about obviously the importance and some of the good practices and capabilities when it comes down to incident response and also intelligence-led threat hunting. What are we actually calling as action going forward as well? One of the key immediate things that we are offering to all of you, working together with all of you, is essentially what we call as a rapid OT cyber maturity assessment, which is aiming to provide you a current state view of your operational technology environment as it stands. Most importantly, giving a view of your technology controls as well as your process and governance controls. Bear in mind, both are equally important as well. You can't have obviously wonderful technology and solutions being implemented, supported by weak governance controls, right? Looking at these particular controls within approximately 6 to 8 weeks of an engagement, essentially giving a view as to what kind of key gaps exist, especially as it applies to OT environment today. Where should your investments be? What are some of the key risks and how do they map back to your business strategy alignment requirements? What are some of the key areas for you to focus on from a priority perspective as it applies to critical business operations? Again, if this is of use to you, feel free to reach out to me or Ben, and I'm more than happy to actually start working together with all of you for this. Now, at the end of the day, it's from understanding the importance of OT, it's important to understand that we are all working towards building a resilient, risk-aware culture. Like we discussed from a roadmap approach perspective, the crawl, walk, run perspective as well, it's important to have a strategic input, importance to have a top-down guidance so that we can start driving capabilities with the importance that it's needed for this environment. Basic controls, network segmentation, secure remote access controls, multi-factor authentication, conducting tabletop exercises. Each one of them essentially are looking into specific aspects of detection, monitoring, management, obviously, and recovery. At the same time, none of these particular elements are good enough if these are not tested and obviously, ensured from an awareness perspective within the organization. At the end of the day, a truly resilient organization is going to focus or typically focuses on six things. Number one, we are focusing on implementing resilience by design, right? Not just to withstand failure, but going beyond recovery, trying to understand the business impact, designing and implementing technical and non-technical controls which are aligned to the business. capabilities from a people, process, technology perspective, which help us work towards an agile response to an event, but also adapt based upon how situation is changing. And at the end of the day, capabilities which help bring these silos together, essentially work together within not only department, but also third parties. And most importantly, which help us learn and improve our response capabilities. Finally, as we kind of, come to the last couple of minutes within this call, I do want to call out the fact that RSM and Dragos together are partnering essentially to bring these joint powerful capabilities together to you to help you essentially manage this critical risk from a cyber perspective for your operational technology environment. What we're looking at is essentially helping you build cybersecurity for these environments, not just as an afterthought or as an incident response, but as a key differentiator within the business. Because we firmly believe at the end of the day that resilience is not just a project. It is a permanent state of readiness, which requires continuous investments and controls. I really hope this has been helpful to all of you from perspective of this particular topic. Feel free to reach out to me to discuss any of these particular elements as we kind of go forward, or reach out in case we can help you in any of these particular spaces going forward. And I genuinely hope this was of interest. We'll also be sharing this particular recording so that you have a copy of this session going forward and can share that internally within the team. But most importantly, if there are any questions outside of this particular session, we'll be happy to attend and answer them. With that, we'll probably open for a couple of minutes. I know we're short on time, but maybe a couple of minutes for a few questions.
We've got some ones floating in there, actually, Kaustubh, which are quite good in terms of, I feel like there's a lot of people who have taken a lot from this session already. If you wouldn't mind, I'll just address that first one. The question is, one of the biggest challenges in IT ICS is asset identification in the industry, and one can say active and passive monitoring. What's recommended in terms of processes and cybersecurity platforms to tackle this challenge? Well, the fact I work for Dragos, the first recommendation there will be Dragos from a platform perspective, but I'm sure the RSM Australia team will be able to support you with some platforms that can run alongside Dragos to support the uplift there. But the biggest piece in terms of processes is aligning to a process and understanding the business you work for and the risk appetite of the business, and therefore making a decision on what that framework or the process is that you're going to align to. Is that the IEC 62443? Is that NIST CSF? There's a number of them. As I shared in the presentation, the 5 critical controls is a great place to start if you're not sure. But understanding that process, aligning to something is the start in order to take that challenge on and really give an uplift there. Is there anything you wanted to add there? Okay.
No, I think you have kind of mentioned that, because that's one of the common pitfalls that we see with so many different organizations, Ben, right? Not having complete end-to-end visibility of their assets. And I think that's one key area to focus on. So I think you've covered that quite well.
Fantastic.
I'll probably take one as well as a question as well. There's a question around obviously incident response planning. And again, I think very critical, especially as it applies to the unique characteristics of this environment. One of the common areas where we see organizations not planning well enough is essentially involvement of the third parties and obviously vendors of these particular equipment, especially in OT, when it comes down to OT cybersecurity planning. I think it's important as well. And that's a big element, especially as it applies to the unique controls, the requirement to obviously, manage the ICS configurations files, the firmwares, which are important to know these devices, which are part of these particular OT environments. And it's important to provide dedicated efforts to the incident response planning process and have combined exercises with some of these parties as we go forward as well. Again, happy to work offline with any of you to help you develop these plans, obviously together with Dragos platform to help you get a visibility end to end to ensure that these plans are workable, usable, and relevant going forward. Anything you wanted to add, Ben, apart from what
I think I just add there that we have the expertise, right? Dragos' incident response team globally have responded to almost every incident, including the Russia's attack on the electric sector across the Ukraine over a number of years. So we've got a lot of credible experience to help customers of RSM Australia in support and working with RSM Australia to develop these incident response plans that are robust, testable, and more importantly, understandable by the board and the C-levels that need to be part of this process as well. So as Kaustubh mentioned, reach out early. You're never too early to start this journey, and you're never too late. But the earlier you reach out, the better place you're going to be. to support an incident response plan. And then, as I mentioned, test that plan and validate it.
Excellent. Happy to see if there are any final questions.
There is another one about AI, which I'm interested in. It's an interesting question. How do you see the role of AI and AI agents in OT, integrated threat management and incident response? That's an evolving topic across a number of different sectors, and I mentioned sectors on purpose there because there is a lot more mature sectors within the operational technology cybersecurity space, which is potentially due to legislation and frameworks. For instance, the energy sector have been a lot heavily regulated, which means that they're on a different maturity curve than potentially other verticals. So I feel the role of AI is a natural evolution. There will be a time and place for AI, but hey, we're just getting started in the OT cyberspace by helping protect some of these devices that are potentially 30, 40, 50 years old in these networks. So, some of them can't support patching, let alone an AI agent. So we need to be understanding of the networks that we're protecting and the networks you all work in, and then developing the procedures and the technology around those assets that you have. But again, it's predicated on the visibility you have today, and how and when AI can become an important part of your defensive structure over time.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Okay, final call for any questions. Okay, if not, then obviously we'll be sharing this particular recording along with the deck with all of you.
Just had one come through, Kay. I don't know if you want to answer that one. It's a good question. Are there ready-made RSM and Dragos solutions to help integrate results from Dragos to the DR and emergency response plan of orgs?
Yes, absolutely, Glenn. And so I think that's where the team will be working together with representation from members of both the teams to essentially put together overall comprehensive DR as well as emergency plans for organization. Again, bringing in technical response capabilities, process response, and business response capabilities together as part of a formal recovery plan for organizations. Okay, conscious of our time. Thank you. Conscious of our time again. Thank you everyone for making the time to join today. We will be sharing this particular recording as we go forward. We do hope that this has been useful. Again, as I mentioned, the team is prepped up, ready to actually help you manage this critical risk and critical environment going forward. Feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you for making the time to join us today.